The movie begins with a man named Mort, sitting in his car. He waits there for a few minutes. His inner voice tells him to leave. He listens to it and drives away, seemingly going through something. He stops his car midway and decides to reverse his car back. He gets out of his car and steals keys from the reception area. He quickly opens up a room and confronts his cheating wife. The scene shifts to his house somewhere in the woods. Mort gets woken up by a knock on his door. He gets up and meets a man named John. He accuses Mort of stealing his work as both of the men are writers. Mort has no idea of what he's talking about. John tells him he has proof. Mort tells him he can call his agent if he has any issues. The man refuses and tries to give him a copy of his work that Mort allegedly plagiarized for himself. He quickly closes the door on him and waits for the man to leave. Eventually John drives off and has left the copies of his work for Mort to read. He takes it in and throws it in the dustbin. Later on, Mort is having trouble with writing. As his brain can't come up with any ideas for his next novel, he goes downstairs and grabs a can, only to see John's copies on his kitchen table. His cleaner gets down and tells him she took it out the trash thinking he's been looking for it. Mort finally reads the copy only to realize it's very similar to his last novel. He gets startled and drops his can. His cleaner rushes in and picks the copies up before they get ruined. Mort retrieves his old novel so he can compare the two. As he compares the two writings, it's evident that they're the same. He gets worried and immediately takes out a pack of cigarettes and smokes one. His cleaner walks upstairs and tells him she's about to leave, but before leaving, she gives him words of encouragement by saying some women don't know what they have until it's gone, and tells him he's a good man. He gets downstairs and throws himself on his sofa, with his mind clouded with the thought of him having plagiarized someone's work. He's woken up by a call from his ex-wife checking up on him. She asks about their dog. Mort tells her to tell him what she wants. She tells him about her packing progress, but Mort isn't interested in that. He asks her about his novel that he wrote called Secret Window. He asks if he was influenced by someone or another story. She tells him she doesn't think so because he was just focused on it. Later on, he decides to take a walk through the forest, only for him to see John. He asks if he's read his copy. Mort says he did. He asks who wrote the novel first. John tells him he wrote it 7 years ago. Mort tells him he wrote it 9 years ago. So the man who deserves compensation is him. The man tells him he's lying. Mort pushes him back and tells him he has to look up the information himself. But John isn't familiar with technology and demands him to give him a copy of the alleged proof. He tells him he's giving him 3 days to give him the hard copy proof he's talking about. Mort asks him if he shows him will he leave him alone. John nods his head with a yes, then walks away. Later on the evening, he sees a paper outside his window. As he goes out to check, he notices a broken bulb outside his porch. He walks out to retrieve the paper, only for it to be a statement about what they discussed. He sees a sheet that's covering something. He pulls it off only to see his lifeless dog's body. He screams in a panic and tells John he will get him back. He locks all the entrances to the house and buries his dog in the morning. He reports the incident to the sheriff. As he tries to give him a description of the man, the sheriff doesn't take his issue seriously, so he goes to a private investigator named Ken to relay the incident to him. He asks if the man threatened his life. Mort tells him the man unalived his dog. Ken tells him he's going to park his car near his place to keep an eye on things, so he shouldn't get startled when he sees his car. He thanks him and walks off. In the evening, he drives back to his house only to see Ken's car. He thinks it's strange the way he parked it, so he carefully checks his car, only for Ken to be asleep. He tells him he's just tired and he made sure he checked all the areas around the house. Before he leaves, he tells him he's going to stay at a nearby hotel if he needs anything. As Ken leaves, Mort hears something upstairs and carefully goes to check it out. He looks in his bedroom and sees a figure through the mirror. He confronts him and tells him to come out or he'll attack him. He nervously walks in and destroys his mirror, only to realize nobody is in the bathroom. He decides to get some fresh air, only for John to walk up behind him. Mort asks him how can he get rid of him. John says he must fix his ending that he messed up. Out of fear, he agrees to do it. John threatens him if he doesn't do what he's promising, he'll harm his ex-wife, then walks away. The next day, he gets a call from his ex-wife Amy, telling him someone burned down their house. He rushes to the scene only to find the property in ruins. Amy runs up and hugs him. Her new boyfriend Ted walks up too. The detective calls them up. He asks if they have any enemies. Amy dismisses the possibility. Mort approaches the detective and says yes, he has one. They get to the station and Mort tells the detectives everything he's been dealing with. They are let out and Amy asks him if he did steal another man's work. He assures her he didn't and claims John is trying to extort him. Later on, he drives home and hears his phone ringing in the house. He quickly gets in and picks up. Ken tells him he was there and checked his area out, assuring him his cabin is safe for now. Ken tells him he made sure he got the copy of the evidence before his house burnt down. Mort thanks him and says he'll pick it up tomorrow. He asks him if he has any evidence of John being there. Mort tells him he has bruises on his arm. He tells him they need to see his neighbor and press him on whether or not he's seen John in the forest or not. The next day, he wakes up from his sleep. Realizing he's late to meet Ken, he looks for his keys only to see his car door opened. He carefully approaches and inspects the inside. He sees a cigarette and assumes it's John's. He goes back to his porch and picks up John's hat as evidence. He walks in the diner where Ken told him to meet him there. He looks all over for him but doesn't see him. He asks the waitress about a man who was looking for him. She tells him nobody from out of town came in. He drives off and sees Ted pouring gas. Mort stops his car and goes back. He gets out of his car and asks him what he's doing here. He tells him he was on his way to his house. Mort walks up to him and says he knows what he's up to. Ted has no idea what he's talking about and serves him Amy's divorce papers. He refuses to sign them and pushes Ted. He tells him he buried his dog because of the man he hired. Ted tries swinging on him but misses. Mort gets home and gets a call. He picks up only for it to be John. He tells him to meet him on the path they met the other day, and if he notifies anyone, there will be repercussions. He runs to the location and sees his neighbor's car. In a panic, he slowly walks up and checks it. He walks up and sees his neighbor and Ken unalive. He looks back and falls out of consciousness. He wakes up a couple of minutes later, only for John to be standing behind him. He tries getting away but he's too weak. He tells him he's still waiting for his finished copy. Mort tells him he's going to the police. John tells him if he goes there, the police will see his screwdriver and that will incriminate him because he's made sure he's left no evidence of his in the car. Mort asks him what he wants. He tells him he has to bring him the proof he promised he was going to get him. Mort asks if he gets him the proof, what will he do? John says he's going to turn himself in to the police and leaves. Mort is forced to get rid of the bodies. He tries retrieving his screwdriver from his neighbor's head. He then drives the neighbor's car in the lake. As he gets home, he gets a call from Amy. She asks him if he's okay. He says he is. Amy seemingly is upset about something and gets emotional on the call. She asks if he thinks things would have been different if they didn't lose their baby, but clearly he doesn't want to talk about it, and drops his phone on her. Amy packs her things and tells Ted she's going to Mort's place to serve him the papers. Ted asks to go with her but she declines him and says he'll just make things worse, then walks off. Mort goes to the post office and asks for his package. The clerk tells him he doesn't look good. She recommends him to rest because he really doesn't look well. He gets in his car and the sheriff walks up and asks to talk to him. Mort tells him he can't talk but he'll call his office. Mort gets to his place and opens the package. He checks for the proof through the pages but realizes John tore a page out the magazine. He gets stressed out and gets in his house. He looks at John's hat and wears it. He looks at himself. He begins having conversations with himself about what's going on in his life, clearly losing his mind. His consciousness asks him if what he's experiencing is real or not. He says he has bruises and checks them out, only to see nothing. His consciousness tells him call the police so they can come and arrest him. Mort refuses to come to terms with the possibility of him losing his mind. He throws his award against his wall and his house tears in half. He starts hearing voices in his head. He approaches his mirror, only to see his reflection looking the other way. John appears in his house and says he's real because he made him up. He explains he gave himself the alter ego and burned Amy's house, as well as the person who unalived both Ken and his neighbor. He tells him he came here to force him to fix his ending. A few minutes later, Amy pulls up and calls him. She knocks on his door but no response. She opens the door and gets in, only to see his house upside down. She calls for him and their dog. She sees a whiskey bottle and realizes he's drunk. She hears footsteps upstairs and goes to check it out. She gets there and it's a mess. She sees curvings of shooter everywhere and gets startled. Mort shows up behind the door, only to be his alter ego John. He approaches her and tries stabbing her, only for Amy to get away. She tries driving away but Mort quickly grabs her out the car and drags her in the house. He stabs her in the leg. She tries getting away but gets pushed on a rock. As Mort was about to finish her off, Ted walks in and hears Amy crying out. He runs to her cries, only to be knocked out by Mort and he unalives him. He walks up to Amy and unalives her too. The next day, Mort walks in the diner seemingly in a good mood. He greets a young lady and tries asking her out but she quickly walks away. The sheriff drives up. He walks in and calls him, only for Mort to be upstairs. The sheriff tells him he knows what he did but he hasn't found the bodies yet. He tells him not to shop in town anymore as it makes people uncomfortable with having him around. Mort is clearly unbothered and tells the sheriff that his next book will be perfect because it has the best ending he ever wrote. Make sure to like and subscribe for more notifications. Until next time, see you soon.